Welcome to Game Soup, it's a game design podcast where we throw ideas in a pot and see what's cooking. I'm Chloe Montgomery and I'm joined by Diana Jones, emerging designer.
Kayla Dice. I think we joked on a previous episode, when do I need to be having emerged rather than in the state of emerging? And we did briefly float when the 2024 nominees are announced, but we're clear, like, that's come and gone. I think I'm still solidly emerging.
I think until somebody's like listing off RPG designers and you're in that list, like, you know, I'm listing off Pondsmith, Howitt, fucking guy who makes, like, Gygax, Dice. Like, until you're in that list, I don't know if you've emerged.
Is your mind that the only people who aren't considered emerging is people who are the closest RPGs have to household names? Because I feel there's a big middle ground between an emerging designer and a famous designer.
Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. I think you're not emerging. I think you are emerging until a large-scale actual play podcast does more than one episode of your game.
That is an interesting thing. But then I also find that paradigm interesting because I'm like, well, you could have barely produced any work and just pay a large actual play to do that. Which, admittedly, that's true of all cases of fame and career steps, that you can pay your way ahead. So, yeah, I guess that doesn't actually contradict that idea. But yeah, I'm emerging. I'm a rising star. I'm a cult icon. I'm an indie
Cult
darling.
classic.
I'm the next big thing. And in 2 weeks, I'd like to be the current big thing, if possible.
And why is that, Kayla?
Because probably not in... I mean, I know when this comes out, but I'm not good at
Saturday.
maths. On October 29th, Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2 launches. And I would, I'd like to be on the road to megastardom now. I don't know.
You're
I
no
think
longer
Transgender Deathmatch
emerging.
Legend... Yeah. Like... I'm tired of being the next big thing. I want to be the only Kayla Dice.
You're sick of being Charlie XCX 5 years ago. You want to be Charlie XCX this year?
In a way, like, I will say Transgender Deathmatch Legend, very brat. Just throwing it out there. I don't think anyone could disagree with that.
Yeah, I can say that. A lot of your games are pretty brat. I will give you this.
Yeah.
Like,
every now and then
Infinite
someone
Dance
asks me
Floor.
about any games I have for all ages, and I always think of a couple of games where I'm like, they'd be so close to being all ages if I didn't romanticize drugs in them.
Just change the drugs to be Calpol. It's fine.
We've got a lot we can do this week.
Yeah.
Because we had that idea last week. I think I've shot over 3 different ideas to you just in general. Maybe not, I might be counting wrong. And also, I had a new segment I wanted to trial. So what do we want to start with? What do you want to start with?
Well, what's the segment? I always love a segment, you know me. A segment that lasts for 2 episodes and then we forget about it entirely.
I'll throw it out there. If I pitch this and we start doing this segment, I think it could last for, like, months.
Okay.
So what I'm pitching is a segment where we call it, like, Production Diary. Or we maybe should get a better name. We maybe should get something that still works. Yeah, some kind of thing. But it will basically be me updating people on what I've got planned with my, with a project I'm working on, and will plausibly be the first, big project I try and do next year, after that. And I was thinking, because, we've talked about games I have coming out on this podcast.
Yeah.
We've worked on games that I've put out on this podcast. But then I was also thinking the fact that, the big games I have released since we started this podcast, or have been working on, have been, Psycho Dungeon and Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2. But both of those, the writing was already finished by the time we started this nearly a year ago. So I think, it could be a fun element, whatever this segment we name it or not, where we just dip into me trying to start a big project, semi from scratch with some ideas, and then we catch it in it. The main reason I'm proposing it being a segment is I don't think this qualifies as us making a game on the show.
It's us workshopping ideas, you go away, do the work, then come back and we talk about it more.
Yeah, or I guess to some extent it's more just like it's like a travelogue kind of thing of where I am on a project I'd be doing anyway. Which is a bit different than like when I said let's workshop ideas for like Out of the Fold, or when I turned this project from Nemesis Revealed. My main distinction here is thrown out there, sorry to everyone, this probably won't go up on the Patreon.
This is a full banger game. This isn't a thing we made in one episode.
Yeah, whereas like Out of the Fold, I should send you things so that can be up on the Patreon.
Nice.
And like Nemesis Retribution, like they're games that came from GameSoup or involved in GameSoup. Whereas this would just be me dipping into like, oh, let's talk about what's Kayla up to this week.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
should I go from the start?
Yeah, hit me with Untitled segment idea, episode 1.
So I actually I was having a conversation with my boyfriend because he was thinking of a cool game idea that I won't spoil on this podcast because that would be a bit
not
rude,
your
I feel.
place. Yeah.
And I was then saying to him, I was like, oh, should I think of other game ideas? Maybe I shouldn't. Like, part of me is getting a bit stressed about like what's my next thing I'll do. But then that seems so pointless when I'm in the middle of making this game happen. He was like, yeah, that makes sense. But then I couldn't sleep one night because that's been a lot of the last 2 months. And I was thinking, and I ended up coming up with an idea, and now I'm settled on, no, it's actually really good for me to get excited about a random far-off game idea. Because that means if Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2 bombs,
You have something to work towards in the future.
yeah, there's something that stops me from crashing out of the industry. Because if it bombs and I have nothing on the horizon, it's so easy for me to just look at this and do a very sensible thing of going, it's time to crash out, it's time to blame everyone else, it's time to do no self-reflection, and leave the 4th industry of my creative career behind.
So,
but a far-off
what's the
idea will keep
idea?
me motivated. So, as you might know, or maybe other listeners of the podcast did, about, like, start of last year, like, very start of last year, like, January 2023, I released an adventure for Orbital Blues that was called The Man We Knew, and it was, like, even though that's a Western game, this was actually, like, a noir in space on a space station, and it riffed a lot of the setting and plot of the film The Third Man by Carol Reed with Orson Welles, which is really good. And I think I'd been talking about this game before because I was like, I really like it, it's a really fun setting. It's pointless for me to reprint because I think selling an adventure for a system that is popular but is not necessarily like the household name level.
Yeah.
I think that's a hard selling point at conventions. Kind of the only time I've seen people having luck with selling like third-party stuff for games that aren't just D&D is Mork, Borg, and Lancer. And I'd randomly had the idea
get
before.
away with, I think.
What was that?
I think you can maybe get away with Troika.
Yeah, I think also, the thing I will say, I think Troika and Morkborg have the advantage, obviously, that they are games people are used to porting content from. Like, being in a, OSR space, it's semi-normal to play, like, an adventure from Troika in Old School Essentials or whatever. I don't actually know enough about this to tell whether I'm completely chatting shit, but, like, I think
it
that's
sounds
something.
correct, and that's enough.
And I thought, like, oh, could I rework this as, like, a setting neutral thing and, like, just put in, not setting neutral, system neutral, where I go, like, hey, you could play this in Orbital Blues, you could play it in Scum and Villainy, or in Starfinder, probably, I don't know, Starforged as well, maybe, who knows? Then I was briefly like, oh, what if I try and, like, tack on a system to this, like, a really short, punchy system, and then I can go, it's a complete game by itself.
Yeah.
And this, I cannot clarify enough, was while I was failing to sleep. It was like 2 a.m. No, something like, wait, if you did build a game, maybe there's more to this space station.
Yeah.
So my current idea is, like, what if I make a game that is fully, like, noir in space? Like, I work out the setting from this adventure, because the setting of the adventure was there had been a bunch of corporate wars before, and this space station in a system was operated by the three major corporations who were all at each other's throat in a deadlock. And the system's security is only really interested in, you know, keeping everyone calm and no one happy, and so there's like this thriving underbelly, and that's what is the setup for this noir in space. In The Man We Knew, it's the setup for that one adventure, but my idea here is like, what if we go all in on space noir?
Yeah, Space Station Noir, I can see it. It's putting Deep Space Nine into my head.
That makes sense, yeah. I'd also been thinking a bit about Citizen Sleeper, even though that's not super noir-y, but like, you know, like there's lots of good stuff where it's something set on a space station, like that actually adds, I think, a lot of just like really interesting dynamics, and also it lets me sort of expand the setting a lot. I'll probably rewrite some things to de-emphasize the you know, nods to westerns, because that element will drop and it'll become its own sort of more clear setting. But also I think it's fun where I can just like sort of ask questions about the world, and then that could start to build an adventure out of it. Where I was thinking, like, does this space station have the death penalty? Because, like, film noir so often involves the death penalty, like either the threat of the death penalty or it being the ending of the characters.
Yeah.
And then when I was thinking about that, I was like, I don't think it has an official death penalty. But I think, like, the worst punishment on this space station is probably, like, exile, where you were just, like, you know, sent out in an escape pod down to a nearby planet, where it's like, yeah, if you're rich, you've probably got the money to, like, set up so you're okay. If you're really poor, that's actually probably a death sentence. They just haven't officially killed you. And then I'm like, well, that has a bunch of settings in that. So I talked before in a previous episode, I can't remember what episode we called it. It was maybe like, did we call it Cast Console 2? It was one where I said I had a system from a different...
for that.
Well, there was one where I said I had this system of mechanics that I had been trying to think of for a game, but hadn't necessarily connected the game with it. Whereas, like, a lot of dice pool building around, like, 5 signature actions, which involve, like, seeking information, telling a lie, avoiding danger. And I remember going, like, oh, it's hard because it's actually such a not combat game, because it was originally for this time travel thing. And I was thinking, well, actually, a lot of this is kind of like, it's investigating. It is a lot of what you're doing. It's going to places, talking to people, interrogating people, trying to figure things out. So I'm like, actually, this setting, this system will meet the genre really well. And then I think there's a lot of... I need to, like, kind of have a capital T think about women.
Me every day, babe.
Oh, it's the thing, because, like... noir is so about women in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Specifically, like, film noir fucking hates women and is terrified of them. And I think a lot of the way neo-noir stuff tries to address that is in itself also kind of misogynistic. So it's then like, you know, what is the angle here? Like, what is the role of women? Also, as I build a setting, does this mean, like... Because I think a lot of sci-fi stuff is implicitly... Definitely in RPGs, it's often, like, more accepting than the world because people aren't necessarily wanting to model, like, real-world bigotry always. Like, you'll see people do a lot of, like, classism stuff. But I think it's rare for someone to go, here's this very sexist sci-fi thing in games. But to some extent, like, that sexism is so important for how, like, a lot of the character archetypes and motivations make sense in film noir. So that's why I'm like, capital T, think about women.
I think, like, having it explicit, like, yeah, shit sucks here, and it sucks especially for women and, like, marginalised groups. Could be an interesting thing to like have.
I mean, I was also thinking about like where I was like, because I think it will probably be a sort of retro future type thing, you know, that cassette futurism. Yeah. I think being that it's noir, like, I don't think these characters have cell phones.
If they have anything, it's maybe like a chunky brick or like a communicator pad or something.
Yeah,
like, if you have this, it's expensive.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of fun ways where I could also say stuff like, I could be like, oh yeah, you do have a communicator pad or whatever, but like it only works if you are in the part of the station managed by the company you bought it from. Oh, sorry, are you in the Oligalo district? Like, your Forever Storm equipment is just not going to work. I hope you realize
you need to get the specific Oligalo network pad.
Yeah, I think like that can be quite fun. The question I have been thinking about that I think I'm getting someone with is like, who are the characters? Because, you know, noir is so much about like isolation and being like lured into darkness and, you know, immoral decisions and a seedy underbelly. And I'm like, if you are 5 detectives who all work together, it's hard to get that impact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, the you saying cassette futurism has put into my head that this is a noir space station game set in the universe of the Alien films.
Yeah, Alien, Blade Runner, these things go in.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, you're a bunch of guys, but maybe it's not expected that you walk out the other end of this mission. Like, of any session, you could just die in maybe, like, 1 or 2 shots.
Yeah,
so, like,
I mean, what
there
I
being
have
5 of you isn't so much of, like, plot armor or whatever. It's like, okay, I have 6 bullets in my chamber. Bang, 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 I got 1 spare.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, lethality stuff, that's pretty easy. No, but I think it's, like, the emotional state. Where I think, like, if there is a sexy woman or a old friend who is trying to manipulate you into doing something that actually goes against your principles, I think it's harder for that mood to hit if you have 4 friends right behind you who are all
telling
like,
jokes.
Don't worry, buddy! You know, resist that! Like, I do think this is a game where the player count for, like, non-GM players probably caps at, like, 3.
Yeah.
Because I think even 4 we've shifted into, like, it's hard for these characters to be isolated. And my current idea is I don't think you... This is the thing, I will say so. Can I share a pet peeve of some games? And then off mic, I'm going to tell you what game I read that prompted me to be more annoyed by this. Off mic.
Okay.
I hate when games believe and talk about the fact that your characters are all supposed to be, like, really tight and a group and, like, united in some way, and then character creation involves no steps to indicate how you know each other.
I feel like a lot of, like, very few mainstream games have, like, and here's how you know each other, though.
I know, but the thing is, I think some genres or setting makes sense. Like, the adventuring party makes sense to me, ultimately. You are people who, you know, have joined together for some kind of adventure purpose. Like, Blades is fine, even though you don't ask these questions necessarily explicitly. It's fine because you're a gang. Obviously, you will join this gang together. That's the question. Even in games of mine, like Psycho Dungeon, it's like, you work together. Like, if your job ever involves you having... If the game ever involves you having a job, it's fine. But I think if the beat is like, you are friends, or you are some kind of social group, and then there's no tools in saying why you're connected with each other or why you have the same motivations, I'm like, this is weird. And
yeah, even if it's just like a pick list of like, we met at school or at our job or whatever.
It feels often like an element of something that is being left to, I guess, a table to figure out. Just fine, I'm sure a lot of tables do figure it out. But I also do feel this is often why I feel very disconnected from certain dungeon crawling games, is because I'm just like, I don't know why my character's here or why I should care about anything, and no one has told me. But so that like prompts the idea of like, oh, should they be a detective agency or a newsroom or something? But I think all being unified in purpose undercuts a lot of like the emotional stuff you can get out of noir. So in my current mind, I'm like, you have different like classes. So you can have, someone's the detective, someone's a cabbie, someone's a claims adjuster, someone is, a entertainer or a lounge singer, other kind of things. And then it's the case that, I think there's a structure in the game where each individual adventure, it's you have individual scenes of how every person is drawn into this mystery web. And your connection between you is you all maybe, often are, regulars at this all-night diner. And then there's always after your individual mystery scenes, are you getting joined together? And I think then that also opens up the fact that you might, want different results from the outcome of whatever this case is or stuff.
I like the idea that you're not just private investigators or cops or whatever. I think you are just private citizens on this spaceship brought together to try to solve whatever seedy shit is going on, because the cops don't care. The cops are just there to protect the space station, to protect the business.
So much noir stuff, it's yes, the PI is this very popular image, and there's lots of PIs, but also so much of it is about, an everyday kind of, schmuck who gets drawn in. So I think, allowing that character type to collide with other character types is interesting. So I adapted some of this system idea I came up with from Patchwork World, which had this thing of, you are marking strain, and then when you tick it off, and that can lead to things. So I think I'll probably really shorten this strain list and have it that, a lot of options are always, hey, here's how your character could die by the end of this adventure. Because that's noir. Yeah. Sometimes you're not going to make it out alive. The other fun thing I think about being citizens, especially, is, and this is a thing that is, I feel not super common in RPGs, but maybe I am, missing examples, is I think it is a really interesting space where murder is pretty easy, but you are not a character who has the social status to get away with murder, and you are not in the setting where murder's not illegal. Yeah. In D&D, you can always kill someone. In Blades, it's gangland warfare where people do die criminals. And that just gets not looked at. Whereas here I'm you can definitely kill someone easy, because guns are not hard to come by, and it does not take much effort to shoot someone to death with a gun. But also, do you know how to get rid of a body? Because
you're not getting away with it.
There's going to be a lot of consequences here. I think that's a fun play space.
Yeah. It's even if you catch the killer or whatever, how do you bring them to justice as Joe Schmo?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of, the individual heart of a game and heart of individual cases would be about, what is justice? What's right? I think there's a lot that could be really fun here. I've also started thinking, I reckon I'm probably going to, devote a lot of December and January, once I'm done with, Fulfillment from Transgender Deathmatch Legend, to, I'm going to have those as, specific months where I'm going to be just trying to write a lot, rather than focusing on all the admin-y parts of this as a job. In the description of this episode, for whatever we title this segment, whether we title it Production Journey, or you think of a cool title and then edit that back in, I put the game down as, Untitled Kayla Dice Noir Game. But the title I am actually thinking of at the moment is I quite like the idea of calling it Void by Night.
Is that referencing something, or is it just cool?
It's there's noir film style stuff like LA by Night.
Oh yeah. I like that.
My boyfriend suggested Midnight in Space. Or
by
no
the light
Midnight
of the solar
in
flare.
I think it's a fun title where it just needs to be comboing a space term with a noir thing. But yeah, that's my exciting production journal or whatever update. Which I realise has taken us to our half an hour line. Do we want to make up some games though?
Let's do
make
a
up at
5-minute
least
game.
one.
Let's do 5 minutes of game.
Okay, let's go
you sent
with
me
the
lots
idea.
of things this week.
Yeah, one was an idea of yours, so I don't know if you want to do this in 5 minutes, maybe not. The other idea I sent you was The Public Domain, an RPG where you play a fictional character who's just entering the public domain, and you have to figure out who you are without the elements of yourself that are still copyrighted. So I don't think you always have to do this by, like, whoever it is in an individual year. You easily could say, like, yeah, for this play session, you're playing Winnie the Pooh in, 2023. And Winnie has to figure out the fact that Tigger's not here anymore because Tigger is
doesn't have a
copyrighted
shirt
still.
on, and
Yeah, or like, oh, hey, awesome, it's Dorothy. Like, okay, these shoes are having to change. Is this a solo journaling game, or is it,
I think it's a solo journaling game, and then maybe you can, like, revisit it throughout your life. So be like, I got some shoes, guys. No.
Or maybe it's like... The only other thing I could see is it's maybe like a BOB game in a sort of, like, loose setting. And you make, like, there's a lot of, like, pre-established playbooks who are public domain characters. Like, we have, oh, it's the Sherlock Holmes playbook in the public domain. But then, like, the playbook for, like, whoever the new person is one where they don't actually have, like, moves and stuff yet. And the point is, as you play the game, you
have to
create the playbook. A bit of design in your game. That could be a fun way about it.
I like that, because it's like, you have to create yourself as a new character. You explicitly can't be like, okay, and now here's Disney stuff. You have to be like, okay, so I know I like honey. Can I be like a honey maker? Could I be the bear who runs the honey shop, maybe?
Yeah. I think maybe you do start with some moves where it's something like, vulnerable moves relating to, like, having to abandon parts of yourself that are copyrighted, and strong moves relating to, connecting to some old route or something. But then it's like, you're building out this playbook as you get it. I think, like, maybe you've got, like, an act structure to it, like a sort of theatrical act structure.
Yeah. I like this.
This is what... Yeah. This is a thing where I occasionally will do something and I go, oh, I thought of a new idea, and then I'm like, new idea or another treatise on the power of storytelling? And I have to be like, another treatise on the power of storytelling.
Thank you for listening to Game Soup.
Bye bye bye. Bye 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 bye.